Good morning and welcome to our 2023 Burnsville Business Transportation Forum. My name is Jennifer Harmoning, President of the Burnsville Chamber of Commerce. And I want to thank our sponsors this morning for help making this happen. Our bronze sponsors, M Health Fairview and Xcel Energy. Our silver sponsors, Coordinated Business Systems, EFH Companies, and Wellington Management. And our gold sponsors, Dakota Electric and Kraus Anderson. These companies sponsor our public policy programs, including this annual transportation forum. I also want to thank our public policy chair and public policy committee who are with us this morning. We will be saving Q&A till the end of the program, so we make sure we get through all the content. But we do have folks here that will hopefully have a nice conversation at the end. I especially also want to thank our partners who are helping put this together. Couldn't do this without Jen Desrude at the City of Burnsville for coordinating, as well as our partners at MNDOT, Dakota County, MVTA. So with that, I'm going to start us off with our friends at MNDOT. Bryant, do you want to take us away?
I would be happy to. Thank you. So my name is Bryant Fisek. I'm with MnDOT Metro and the South Area Engineer. And what that means is I'm pretty much a liaison in Dakota County with the cities in the county and try to be the first point of contact and really connect, advocate for the cities in the county and just try to make it better when you're working with MnDOT. And I've got four projects that we'll talk about today, and they are, we'll talk about at a high level, but definitely, like was said, if there's questions at the end, be happy to dive into those more if needed. So the first one we have here on the screen is for I-35W, and I know the map is a little bit small on the side there, but it is a pretty long corridor that we're looking at, and this is a pavement preservation project that we're looking forward to, and the purpose is really to improve safety, reduce congestion, and then we also have the opportunity to improve some ped safety and accessibility. So we do have the location there. Like I said, it is a longer corridor. It's on 35W from the junction where 35W and 35E come together up to Cliff Road, where there's some current activity going on. And then also we'll be working at that interchange with Highway 13. So it'll go a little bit east and west on Highway 13 as we improve the area there. Got a few bullets on the scope. It is an unbonded concrete overlay, which is just a way we lay the road down. So the main point there is we're putting down that concrete in hopes of having a nice pavement that'll last for many, many years. There's also some, there'll be pavement reconstruction under the bridges. Like is identified there, there are 3 bridges that will be taken down and then replaced. And along with that, we'll be looking at the hydraulics, repair, replace as needed. Currently in this corridor, the lighting is only at the interchange locations, and we want to make that consistent throughout the whole corridor, so there will be lighting improvements. And then as we look at the local road connections, we'll be doing ADA improvements. So adding improvements to the signals at the ramp ends, repair sidewalks. There will be a new shared use path on Burnsville Parkway over the bridge or on the bridge. And then the last part on there is spot mobility improvements. We'll be looking at auxiliary lanes and buffer lanes to really improve those interchange operations. This will be coordinated with the city for their highway or County Road 42 TED project. And I know Jen will talk about that a little bit later, so I'll leave that alone other than to note that we are coordinating for that project. The timeline on this one is for 2025, 2026. So it will be a 2-year project. And we are working on what that means in terms of staging. Right now, we expect it to be built about half at a time, which will limit it to 2 lanes in each directions, but we're still working on how that staging will work, how the interchanges will work, and just overall what that means for mobility as people move through those years of construction. Go to the next slide, please. All right, next one on the list is Highway 77. And this one again is a pavement preservation and repair to the bridge. On the map, you can see there, we're going from essentially what is the end of the MnDOT highway right around 138th Street in Apple Valley, and then it runs north all the way across the river. So we are working on the river bridge as well. Safety project again, improve the surface and then improve the ped and accessibilities. So this is there'll be some small mill and overlays at the north end, but this is primarily another concrete overlay, particularly for the sections south of Highway 13. More hydraulic repairs, more ADA improvements, and then, like I said, for the river bridge, we'll be redecking and cable repair, just trying to make sure we keep the bridge in good shape into the future. I know this one's a little bit outside of Burnsville, but it does impact how operations happen as people are traveling north and moving back and forth in this general area. So we wanted to make sure to mention this. There will be construction impacts or traffic impacts, again, as we look towards what that means on what that means in terms of construction. And one of the things we're keenly aware of is not having this one overlap with our 35 work, our 35W work. So we are talking back and forth how we will make those adjustments between the two and make sure that we're not limiting capacity on both corridors at the same time. We want to finish up the I-35W work before we get into the 77 work, and there's lots of talks, lots of discussion about how we make that happen. All right, let's go ahead and move on. Yep, so the next one we have, this one is a study right now for the I-35W corridor. And as a study, we're just looking to understand what's happening in the corridor, provide some guidance and framework for the area. It is linked to a future construction project, and it'll help us understand what we want to put into that project and how we will, what elements will go into it. The location on this one runs from County Road 70 interchange way in the south up to the 35W, 35E junction. So it's kind of the next segment from the 35W project I was talking about. And for the scope, you can see we have the bullets there. We're just looking at engaging with the cities, the county, making sure we look at what's happening now, what those future forecasting will be. We'll be doing modeling of the area, and like I said, really trying to figure out what those corridor concepts should be. Should we be adding easy pass lanes? Do we need more improvements on the interchange? And one of the big parts of this project will lead to determining the future footprint of the 35 and County Road 50 interchange. That's a future county project, and what we're trying to do in this study is help lead into that for the county, and so they can understand what the full footprint in the future might be as they look towards improvements in that area. Yeah, this obviously this will lead to construction in the future, but we don't know what any of those impacts will be until we get through the study and fully understand what exactly we will be looking to build. All right. This last one I have, Highway 13. There's a lot of activity going on this one. The first image I have, which you will see again later, as this gets into some of the other presentations, is just the visioning study that was done on this corridor, and ran from Nicollet Avenue on the east all the way over to Highway 169 in the west. And it looked at, it defined the access, looked at intersection type, looked at local road improvements. And the idea for this study was to really streamline the process for future projects and still maintain flexibility. It looked at many different alternatives and different ways to handle the traffic, but it really wanted to set that vision up and set the cities and the counties up for that future work as we move forward together on this corridor. So currently there is work on the west end between Highway 101, the interchange there, and Quinton Avenue. Again, west of here, but good project that is in just finishing up year one of a 2-year construction project. So that'll have a new bridge over Dakota Avenue there. That's the bottom portion there. You can see with the yellow colors, all the new pavement that's going in there and how we'll be improving that area. And again, that's the first project of what we are expecting to be several. Hopefully we will get this all done in the near future. And this is definitely one that Jen will talk about again as we move down to her presentation. Yeah, I think with that, those cover my projects. So thank you for your time. I do appreciate the opportunity to be here. I will hang out for questions, but otherwise I will pass it along to Tony at the county. So thank you.
Well, good morning, everybody. Again, my name is Tony Watska. I'm a senior project manager for the Dakota County Transportation Department. And I'll cover just a couple projects here that we have coming up over the next couple of years for the county. So I'll start with one of the projects I'm managing. This is that Burnsville Parkway and County Road 11, where we're proposing a roundabout. And then I'll cover a few other county projects, including some mill and overlays, as well as a few County Road 42 projects and studies that the county's leading, as well as some good coordination with the City of Burnsville. And then we'll have discussion and questions at the end of all the presentations. So to start, this is Burnsville Parkway at County Road 11. Work with the City of Burnsville to essentially address an outdated traffic signal and improve kind of the mobility needs at this intersection. And then mainly to looking at the traffic signal, enhance the pedestrian and bike usability here, reduce delays, and kind of increase accessibility for all users, and just to make a safer intersection. Just want to start briefly too on some of the public involvement and communications that's been done to date. We had our first open house back in May of this year. And have a little snapshot there of kind of our open house summary. So we had about 37 attendees. The input ID interactions is the little map you see down below there. That's an online comment map that we had up on the website for people to provide comments on issues they see in the intersection, comments, suggestions. And so we had at that time almost 250 interactions. And then in total, almost 300 with comments, emails, in-person discussions for that period of time. And then we had another kind of public event. We were at the party in the plaza on July 21st. I had a little tent actually next to the City of Burnsville. Good feedback, a lot of people kind of passing by, taking a look at, we had a layout at that time of the intersection and proposed improvements. Generally comments that we've seen or we've heard to date, pedestrian safety, traffic and congestion, access certainly during construction. What does that look like? What could that look like? And then some questions too about kind of financial responsibility of the project. And then as we look into the future years, this project will be constructed in 24. So we have another year and a half of kind of engagement and design. So we'll continue to do social media updates and email updates through that period of time. Looking at coordinating with Jen and the city at the Public Works Open House. We'll look at a city newsletter article and then additional open house and pop-up events near the park or at other locations in the city. Just a snapshot here. This is the latest look at the design. This is from just about a week or so ago. Big changes here. One of the things the roundabout was looking to do is to avoid any park impacts. You'll kind of see that the alignment of the roundabout shifted slightly to the west to avoid the park. We do have a little bit of water infiltration or some sort of stormwater treatment that we're planning to do with this project. And then there'll be certainly landscaping elements incorporated here in the center median and likely around any water features. And then another connection too is just the trail connections, lighting, and we have some additional turn lanes that we're looking at on the north side of Skyline, just to accommodate those movements into the neighborhood and get cars out of that kind of free flow lane. So just a update here, funding and construction. The current cost estimate is around $2 million. This project was awarded $1.4 million in federal funding, which leaves a cost split between the City of Burnsville and Dakota County of about $600,000. And then in terms of construction timeline, design is currently active right now. We'll look to have final designs by about this time next year. And we're working, the next phase of the design will look at detours, construction. We are at this time expecting a potential full closure with detours of this intersection. There may be some phasing opportunities, and certainly there'll be an opportunity, or the intersection will be open for emergency vehicles. More information there to come as the design progresses and we get into that level of design. So construction, spring, summer 24, typically a project like this, couple months, 3-4 months, always dependent on weather, but we'd expect it to be open by the winter of 24. And then just a little look here at the schedule. So we're right in between what we call preliminary design and final design. So we have a 30% design that was just completed that we're reviewing, and then we'll move into the next phase, which is 60%. With final design in 23 and construction in 24. And then the website there too, certainly use that website and just search County Road 11. It'll pop up for the project. We have materials there for our our open house, as well as some background information just in general about the project. And we'll continue to update that with additional material over the next year or so. And then some other upcoming county projects, 23 and 24 mill and overlays. I'll touch briefly on those, and then briefly on the County Road 42 projects and studies, and then we'll kind of lead into some of the discussion that Jen will have later this morning too. So we'll start with the mill and overlays for 23. There's 3 in Burnsville. They're all trail projects, so these will be trail reclamation projects. We have one on County Road 5 that'll be on the east side of the roadway. You can see that'll be number 15 in the map there. And County Road 11, that's the 16 that's on the east side of County Road 11. And then County Road 38, that's number 17 there, McAndrew Road, so it'll be on the south side of the road. And then in 24, a little larger project, that's Cliff Road. This project will essentially have the goals to improve safety and pavement quality, and then also improve the pedestrian ramp facilities and kind of ADA head push ramp buttons. And that'll be scheduled now for 24 construction season. So that'll be active design coming up next year. And then briefly here, some County Road 42 project and studies. For 1 and 2 there, we'll have more information from Jen at the end of the presentations today. I'll kind of cover briefly 3 and 4 here. So the trail gap improvements from County Road 5 to Lac Levon, and then a little bit here on the South Cross Drive, which is right on the border of Apple Valley and Burnsville. So first here, the County Road 42 trail gap improvement study. This is essentially looking at segments with no trails or areas that have trail replacement or improvements. The snapshot here kind of is a great example of one of the things this project will look at improving in the future. It's 2.4 miles, and then the construction year is yet to be programmed. We'll see that probably coming up in the next CIP cycle for 26 or 27. And here at County Road 42, South Cross Drive, proposed signal replacement at South Cross in 24. And then as we kind of look at the border here, there's some other future improvement projects closer to Elm Drive and Redwood Drive, adding a pedestrian trail underpass to Redwood Park, and then taking a look at the configuration of the intersection of Elm, removing that signal and adding more of a 3/4 access with stop signs here. And that's currently kind of being analyzed now. Funding year for construction, again, kind of to be determined, would be in that 25, 26 range. And as always, kind of depending on funding and constructability timeline. And I'll hold for questions at the end. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Aaron Bartling. I am the planning manager for Minnesota Valley Transit. And then I also have Patrick Shilton on as well today, who's our senior manager of external affairs. Next slide. So with our presentation, we first thought it'd be good to kind of touch on where we're at with service and how we've kind of been performing since the pandemic has really thrown the transit industry, well, all industries off a little bit, but on the transit side, we obviously saw a lot of ridership declines early on in the pandemic. So touching on kind of where we're at now, I think we have some very positive trends that we're seeing, starting with overall ridership growth of up 73% compared to last year. So this has mainly been a result of just people kind of going back to work, people going back to classes at the U of M, and then just people becoming more comfortable riding transit again. But it's also a result of us kind of phasing the introduction of services back over time as well. So we typically have 4 service changes a year, and throughout the whole pandemic, we've tried to kind of span it out and plan out how much service we can add back in each service period. So we've been able to add some express services back, and we've also been able to kind of reinvest into our local services as well down here in the South Metro and bringing back some better connections and more trip options for customers that live down in the South Metro, including Burnsville. MVTA Connect, which is MVTA's on-demand service, so similar to your like Uber, Lyft style service where riders can use an app to book their rides, has seen huge successes throughout the pandemic. This was a route or a service that started in 2019, so just before COVID, and since then we've continued to put more and more buses out there, so much so that we struggle to keep up with the demand at times because we see exponential growth continuously. In fact, we've actually seen record ridership months, 15 out of the last 21 months. So just to get a little idea of where that or how that growth is happening. And then for express ridership, so this is one that is still down when you look at pre-COVID numbers, but we're definitely seeing some very positive trends. And a lot of our growth was initially driven by the University of Minnesota going back to in-person classes, and that drove a lot of ridership on our express routes heading down to the campus and through downtown. But we've also seen different waves of people coming back to work in their office downtown that has led to some growth on our express routes as well. So much so that with the most recent park and ride survey, which is something that the entire region participates in, we just completed one this past October. Burnsville Transit Station at Nicollet and Highway 13 was ranked number 2 in the whole region for utilization, meaning it had the second most cars parked at it using express services. And then the chart on the right just kind of breaks down our ridership compared to last year. So each column represents total ridership year to date, and then broken out by the different categories for local, express, weekend service, connect, and then special events. So the formatting got off a little bit there, so it's hard to see some of the numbers, but overall, we've seen growth in every single category this past year. And one that I want to point out is the special event service there on the top. This is something that we've been trying to prioritize more over the last few years, and we've really seen some successes with that this year. Looking at State Fair, we saw some record numbers on some days of the State Fair this year. And then we've added some service to Renaissance Festival, and some of you may have heard in the news kind of what's going on there and the challenges that we're faced with the large crowds that we're attending. So it's something that we're looking in the future and potentially exploring new locations to get those people to the Renaissance Festival grounds. And then focused on Burnsville, we provided service to the Burnsville Festival and Fire Muster this year, which saw huge success. And we saw We're providing service roughly every 15 minutes, I think, out of the Burnsville transit station to get people down into the grounds there. And we saw some huge ridership successes on that service as well. Next slide. So now that we kind of have a base of where we're at with service, the rest of the presentation will kind of be focused on the future and some big projects that we're looking at. And I'll set that up under this new initiative that we've kind of formed. It's brand new, so much so that we don't even really have informational materials around this yet. But essentially, it's MVTA Transform 2028, and it's essentially identifying key projects and focus areas that as an agency we want to be focusing on over the next 5-6 years to really move our agency forward. And as it says there, elevate the ride for our customers. So there's a big customer experience focus with all of these projects that we're focusing on. Next slide. So I've listed out those projects and focus areas here. There's 7 in total, ranging from specific projects at a certain site to more general items like real-time information and how we're pushing that out across our whole system and service area as well. And I've highlighted 3 projects on here that I'm going to focus a bit more on here today that have a bit more of an impact to Burnsville as well. So first one being our Burnsville bus garage modernization, and then touching on our network redesign that we'll be moving forward with in the coming year. And then wrapping up with the County Road 42 bus rapid transit study that we just kicked off. Next slide. So we'll start with the Burnsville bus garage modernization. And for those of you that aren't familiar, this is kind of tucked back behind the Pepsi plant off of Cliff Road. And this is a facility that was originally opened in 1977 and was a manufacturing plant. And then in the mid 90s, it was converted to be a transit facility and bus garage. In 2018, the Met Council completed a study kind of reviewing bus garage facilities across the region, and this facility was actually, it received the lowest score in terms of overall conditions among all facilities across the region. So there's a big need to make some improvements. So I kind of called out what we were looking at with this project there. So looking at state of good repair was the main priority, but then what are those safety security enhancements we can make, modernizing the building, storage expansion, which was a huge need. We were kind of maxed out on storage space, maintenance area improvements, looking at fleet electrification and infrastructure that goes along with that, and other sustainability innovations. And then finally, an employee workforce training center. And I'll touch on a few of those here in the next few slides as well. So this is just a kind of a graphic showing the phasing of the project. So the project has been split into 3 different phases, and we're nearing the end of phase 1, which you can see on the left side of the screen there, the kind of teal greenish areas were the big priorities for phase 1. So bus storage addition. So we actually took off the north wall of our garage and expanded it out to give us more inside bus storage. Previously, we were storing a lot of buses outside in this space. And then we also added a new bus wash system, which I'll touch on a little bit later too, and some of the efficiencies we gained with that. And then state of good repair items was also a big focus on this project, or phase 1 of the project. And then phases 2 and 3 are going to be concurrent phases that'll be taking off here in the next year. That'll be looking at more maintenance or enhancing our maintenance areas. So the red areas that you see there, kind of expanding on the west side of our garage and getting more maintenance space in there, which will open up space inside the main garage as well. And then some fueling items and vehicle storage for non-revenue vehicles, things like that. And then finally wrapping up with a workforce training center. Next slide. So just a breakdown on funding for the project, because obviously a project to this scale is not cheap. Overall project cost is sitting around 13 million, and we have received over $10.5 million in federal funds, which we're extremely grateful for. So I kind of broke down what those federal grants were for each of the phases. So it started with phase 1, which we were awarded 2020 grant funds from the Buses and Bus Facilities Program through the Federal Transit Administration. And you can see the cost breakdown there. So this is the phase that we're nearing completion, and I believe substantial completion is expected in January. So just in a month or two away from now. And then we'll kind of kick off phases 2 and 3, which have also received federal funds. So the phase 2 portion of it, we applied for funds through Met Council's regional solicitation process, which is how we access transit dollars from FTA that are given to our region. And then we were also awarded the Buses and Bus Facilities Grant Program dollars in 2021 as well from FTA. And phases 2 and 3 are expected to be completed in 2024 sometime. So just a couple of construction photos of some of the work that was going on. These are from earlier this summer, and I promise you it looks much better out there now. So this big photo on the left is showing how we took out that north wall where we were extending it out further. And then the top right photo is the base foundation work for the new bus garage facility. So currently this was, or bus wash, this was located inside of our garage and was a pretty old and dated bus wash system. So we'll be kind of making that its own standalone building and having some improvements there. And then the bottom right, which was a lot of the kind of highlighting the state of good repair items. So we had pretty much, they had to go around the entire building and replace blocks in a number of sections that just due to over the years and water and things like that just needed to be replaced and then kind of refreshed. So a lot of masonry repairs as well. Next slide. So now touching on some of the key elements of the garage focused around sustainability and electrification. On the sustainability side of things, so we'll start with just looking at energy efficiencies through lighting, electrical, and HVAC systems, and how we can retrofit the existing building to kind of come up to higher standards, things like that. And then specifically with the bus wash, we're implementing a reclaimed water usage system for the bus wash, so it'll reduce water consumption and minimize wastewater as well. Our buses get washed daily when they come back to the garage, so we go through a lot of water. So trying to reuse water is definitely a priority for us. And then we're also wrapping up a sustainability plan, which the final plan is actually actively being reviewed by our staff right now before we give the final sign off, and we'll be implementing some elements of that and trying to incorporate that into phases 2 and 3 of this project. Next slide. And then electrification is a big focus of this as well. We hear a lot about moving towards electric buses, so we're kind of setting the stage for that and how we can start thinking about that. At the facility currently, the electrical capacity doesn't allow for full-on bus charging, but it does allow for non-bus electric charging. So we're exploring how we can start incorporating some of those elements. And then phase 2, we'll be diving further into how we can account for battery electric bus infrastructure needs, because they take a lot of energy. And we're also actively working on a zero emission bus transition plan to kind of figure out what that looks like and how many buses or what service will these electric buses run on, things like that, and what needs do we have at the garage to be able to support that. And then finally, just the consideration of electric vehicle charging just for people that are visiting our building, as well as our employees that are coming here every single day. And the last part of the bus garage modernization is focusing on a workforce center. So this is essentially will become a training center for both in-house and external activities. So a big focus will be with bus driver training and mechanic training, especially as we start looking towards battery electric buses. There's going to be a lot of training that goes along with that, as our current mechanics and bus drivers aren't familiar with those because we don't have any of them in our fleet. But then we'll also be looking for partnerships with local agencies as well, and be able to open this space up for a training center and workforce center overall. So there's a couple of conceptual designs. They're pretty stale because they're black and white and don't show too much, but just try to give a little bit of an image of what we're kind of looking at for that being added on to our facility here. All right, so next transform initiative is focused on our network redesign. So this would be a phased implementation of our system-wide study and the proposed changes that came out of that. And we're looking to start moving forward with some of these items as early as next year in 2023. Next slide. So like I said, we'll be beginning this implementation in 2023. We're nearing the end of our study side of things. So we are wrapping up our system-wide study, which has been going on for the last year and a half or so, which really did a comprehensive review of our service system-wide and reviewed it for efficiencies, performance, and are we serving the right areas? Are we missing certain locations, things like that. On the Burnsville side of things, we have 4 local routes in Burnsville and 3 express routes that either go downtown to Minneapolis, scratch that, 4 express routes, 2 to Minneapolis, 1 to St. Paul, and then 1 that's more of a suburban express connection as well that goes out to Shakopee as well as the Mall of America. And then we have our on-demand service MVTA Connect. So it's really looking at how are these working well, how are they not? And based on the initial recommendations, there are some changes that I think we can be moving forward with as early as next year in the Burnsville area to really make better connections and more improved service for residents in the city. So other project elements include, so the phased implementation of route changes, but then we're also going to be converting our flag stop system to designated stops. So if you're not familiar with what a flag stop system is, essentially it's a stop that there's not actually a sign in the ground for. So the bus might travel by it, but really a rider could stand anywhere along that section of the route that's identified as flag stop and raise their hand, and the bus will stop for them if it's a safe location. You can imagine that there's challenges with this and especially when you're trying to attract new riders. It's a confusing system, and personally, it's hard for me to even trust that a bus would actually stop for you too when you're standing on the side of a road that there's not actually a sign for. So we're prioritizing with the implementation of these route changes to get rid of that and actually put signs in the ground so that there's a presence there and people know that they can guarantee the bus will stop there for them if they're standing there. So along with that, if you've seen our signs out on the road, they're pretty sad today, and a lot of them are faded and you can't even read them anymore. So we're going to be redesigning our signs, putting some more branding behind it. So there's a draft concept on the screen there, just to draw a little bit more attention and excitement around our service and make it more present, and then also include key elements that don't exist on our signs today to push people to get more information. So we'll have more information on the routes that are actually serving that stop and kind of the destinations that they're serving. We'll have the stop number on there, which can be used to go into our mobile app and get real-time information and see, when is my bus actually going to be here? Is it 5 minutes away or is it 2 minutes away, type of thing. And then exploring other passenger amenities and real-time information at key locations as well, and looking at like e-paper signage that can update automatically and things like that. So the final project I'll touch on with the Transform initiative is our County Road 42 Bus Rapid Transit Study, or BRT. So MVTA is leading a study to review BRT service along the 42 corridor, and obviously Burnsville plays a large part in that corridor as being kind of the heart of our service area. So we are looking, the study extents are from Marshall Road Transit Station out in Shakopee all the way over to Dakota County Technical College in Rosemount. So it's a pretty long corridor, and we've hired a consultant to kind of dive into it and look at what some different alternatives look like and what makes sense from a BRT perspective. Next slide. So the purpose is to determine the benefits, costs, and impacts of implementing kind of a first of its kind in our region suburban bus rapid transit route along County Road 42. So you hear a lot about BRT in the region, but it's often focused on the core. We have a couple routes that extend out into the Southern Metro with the orange line and the red line, but we don't have any true routes that are focused on that suburban need and providing those connections as well. So we see an opportunity with these other north-south connections that are already coming into the area to kind of expand on that and create those east-west connections as well. So this is building off of previously completed studies that have recommended transit improvements along the corridor, or we're trying to leverage newer plan development in the areas immediately on the corridor, as well as some surrounding areas as well. So a couple examples of that, Dakota County had a couple of studies, one specifically looking at east-west transit that recommended greater improvements along 42. There's the Highway 42 visioning study that kind of calls out some specific elements that would support enhanced transit. And then there's Burnsville Center redevelopment vision plan that would be a big driver of ridership and kind of a destination that people would want to travel to as that moves forward. So trying to build off of a lot of these local studies that have already taken place and take it to that next step to put that service component down on it. So we kicked off the study in September, and it's expected to be about a year-long process. So completed sometime late next year. And then we are going to be kicking off our first round of public and stakeholder engagement in early December. So we're kind of getting all the materials ready for that. But you may see some things coming out about that here soon, about how to kind of get involved and shape the initial process for this study. So with that, I'll just note that these are just 3 of our 7 overall major initiatives that we're looking to move forward with in the next few years. Obviously, these take a lot of resources and funding, so we're going to constantly be out there trying to get support from stakeholders and things like that to help us carry these initiatives forward that we feel are priorities and are necessary to help keep moving our agency forward. And I'll take any questions at the end, and my contact info is up there, and as well as Patrick's as well.
All right, thanks, Aaron. So my name is Jen Desert. I'm the city engineer for Burnsville, and I have our city transportation updates. And as Bryant and Tony had both mentioned, we are partnering with all of these agencies. And so I'm gonna kind of expand upon some of the things that they've already talked about as well. But starting at sort of our basics, we have a street improvement program, and it's annual. We do street improvements. We look at our 225 miles of city streets, and we prioritize what needs we have for street improvements. We have funding from the city, from state aid, and from special assessments. For our 2023 street improvement program, we have, these are just the commercial areas, thinking this is for the Chamber of Commerce. I wanted to focus in on what might be important to you. We do have a number of residential areas as well. But in the commercial areas, we're doing 2 pretty big significant areas. So Nicollet Avenue, north of County Road 42 to just north of McAndrews, and then Nicollet Boulevard on the west side and a portion of Grand Avenue. And then just south of there, we are doing a street improvement on Grand Avenue and 145th Street south of County Road 42. So those are our sort of bigger commercial areas. Like I said, we do a lot of street improvements in residential neighborhoods as well. And then just in October of 2021, the City Council approved multimodal plan and a complete streets policy. And so the complete streets policy implementation was to start with our 2023 project. So we started to look at all of our street improvements and take a hard look to see what kind of additional improvements we could make in the multimodal realm and also for complete streets. So that work was done in 2021. There was a lot of public and community engagement. The multimodal system plan provided recommendations, and then implementation and prioritization and funding strategies. And then the complete streets policy was also approved at that time. So our 2023 multimodal infrastructure, we're proposing to do in conjunction with some planned projects, those 2 that I just mentioned. So here's a little lay of the land here. So around Nicollet, there's a trail on the north side of McAndrews, and there's a 10-foot trail on the east side of Nicollet, north of McAndrews. And then there's a 10-foot trail on County Road 42, but there's not a connection in between. We also in 2022 added some on-street bike lanes. So we have on-street bike lanes on Portland, and we have on-street bike lanes on Nicollet Boulevard. So in 2023, we're proposing a 10-foot trail on the east side of Nicollet. So there's a sidewalk there today, a pretty narrow sidewalk, but this would create more of a system, more of a network of 10-foot trails, and then connecting in with our on-street bike lanes. Our other area that I just mentioned was on Grand Avenue for 2023. So again, kind of the lay of the land here. There's a 10-foot trail on the north side of County Road 42. We have our on-street bike lanes kind of extending on Portland down to 42. And then what we're proposing is between South Cross and 42, a 10-foot multi-use trail on the west side. And so then just putting it all together, the areas in green are existing trails, and then there's a dashed green that's our existing on-street bike lanes. In 2023, if we construct these two 10-foot trails, you can create that network. And then the city, in partnership with Dakota County, applied for a Safe Streets for All grant through a federal grant. And we applied for this network, which is a pretty big network, but it would fill the gaps on County Road 42 on both sides of the street, on County Road 5 on both sides of the street, and then on one side of Buck Hill Road, Crystal Lake Road, and South Cross. So creating this network, starting to build a multimodal network around the Center Village redevelopment area is one of our goals. Also multimodal, I talked about this if you were in the transportation forum last year, the 35W frontage trail. So this is a picture with the bike is a picture from 2019 where the trail flooded. We're not having those problems in the last couple of years, but it will come back again where it would have flooded. And so we are working on raising up the trail. So it's mostly out of the floodplain. And we did receive a federal grant from on that last year. And so we will be, if you've been out in that area, you might have seen some construction starting. We did some rough grading this fall and put on some surcharge material. And then in the spring, we'll start the trail construction. Another project working on with Dakota County in 2023, we're going to be studying Cliff Road and a part of Nicollet. We're going to be looking at lanes and access on Cliff between 35W and River Hills Drive. There's trail gaps on Cliff that we'll be looking at, and then a trail connection on Nicollet between Cliff and 13. So that's a study that we're partnering with Dakota County on. There'll be a large public engagement and outreach plan to go with that. So this is a project that both Bryant and Tony touched on over by the Burnsville Center Village area. So on the right side is the 35W exit ramp. And again, I talked about this at the last year's forum. If you were present or watched it, we had at that time applied for grant funding but hadn't received it. And now we have received TED grant funding, or Transportation Economic Development funding, for this new exit ramp. And so this would be tied to the project that Bryant was talking about on 35W from Cliff down to here, and would be constructed in conjunction with that project. So it would be, I'm not sure if you can see my mouse, but it would be a new exit ramp. Right now, if you're on 35W going southbound and you wanted to get to 42, your only option is to come up this, and you can go left, right, straight, wherever. But this signal is in this area is very congested. So what we're proposing is, at this point, you would decide if you wanted to go west on 42, you'd come up the same ramp and you'd turn right and go. If you wanted to go east on 42 or into the mall area or south on Buck Hill Road, you would take this new ramp that would come under 42. And at this point, you could loop back up to 42, or you could come down and go into the mall or down south on Buck Hill Road. So that's a project that we are starting to work on preliminary design with a consultant. Here, this website here, burnsvillemn.gov/Center Village Roads, is where you can find all the information, and you can submit comments, and you can find out when we're doing public engagement activities. Then, because this is so close to the 35W exit ramp, we wanted to study the possibility of this Aldrich Avenue extension. So this would be a multimodal corridor that connects 42 down to, it's showing the ring road at the mall, but eventually to Buck Hill Road. And it will connect with the redevelopment area that we're hoping will happen in this area here. The Sears site has been vacant for several years, and we've been working with Seritage on possibilities of redevelopment. So that this road would be a pretty important connection for them to bring in the new residential units and whatever other redevelopment they are going to do. So for funding, I'll go back on the right side here, 35W exit ramp, we did receive 3.1 million in TED grant funding, and the total project is estimated to be 5 million. And so the remaining cost will be a local split between Dakota County and the City of Burnsville. We're anticipating construction to begin in 2025 at the same time as the MNDOT corridor, 35W corridor. The Aldrich extension, on the other hand, does not have funding. So we are just doing a preliminary design, trying to figure out what would that roadway look like, really making it a multimodal corridor, looking at wide trails and sidewalks, possibilities for cafe seating and things like that, and a parkway feel. So we're just looking at that now, and we would need to acquire any additional right-of-way for future construction. So that's in a very preliminary phase and doesn't have any timeline or construction year. And then things that we're considering on 35W, where will this roundabout be? There's some ability to adjust it based on what Seritage redevelopment plans are. And then we're looking at what kind of improvements to make at 42. There's some pedestrian crossing enhancements that can be made, and we're starting to look at that, signal timing and phasing and things like that. And then how are we going to connect into this internal ring road? Because the phasing of this project is, it's happening in 2025, and we don't know when redevelopment will occur on the rest of the site. So we have to make sure that the rest of the mall functions in that interim period between redevelopment or between when they're functioning as a mall and redevelopment. And then on the Aldridge side, we're starting to explore if some sort of grade separation at Aldridge will work. We're looking at roadway configurations. Like I mentioned, all modes of travel is important here, and a sort of more of a parkway streetscape type of feel. And then this one also has to connect to the ring road too. And our design team has been trying to make sure that if we were to get funding for Aldrich, that there's this interim condition where some of the mall sites will be still as they are, some will be redeveloping, and so how do we make all of that work? And that's some of the things we're looking at right now. And then the Highway 13 vision study. So Bryant talked about this as well, and he talked mostly about the Dakota Avenue improvements, which are under construction. But we also, as a group, studied all of the intersections between this Dakota one, which is under construction, all the way to Nicollet. And the study shows new interchange in this Quinton and Lynn area, a new interchange at Chowan, an overpass at Washburn, and then a quadrant interchange at Nicollet. And so this is the quadrant interchange at Nicollet, and I did show this last year. And at the time, we were seeking a RAISE grant. We did not receive it, unfortunately, but the city council was had the objective to try and fund this one project. And so the city staff and our consultants have been working on applying for a RAISE grant, an infra grant, which is another federal grant. We were unsuccessful in those. We are out right now for a Reconnecting Communities grant. And then we will likely be successful in the regional solicitation. They haven't announced yet, but this project scored second highest in the list. So we're pretty confident that we'll be awarded $10 million for this project. Well, while we were actively working on just this project, Corridors of Commerce funding announcement was made in, I think it was August. And just a little background on that, it was created in 2013 by the legislature, focuses on transportation investments on state highways with a focus on economic growth. And there's anticipated to be $250 million allocation not for construction in 2022, but for the award of a project, and then the construction would be before 2027. So some agency partners, Scott County, Savage, us, and Dakota County have been meeting to talk about should we apply for a Corridors of Commerce project to just do all the projects. So Dakota is already underway and funded, but to do Quinton and Lynn and Savage, Chowan and Washburn, and Nicollet and Burnsville. And that's what we're planning on doing. So we have gotten support from the City Council to move forward with this coalition approach to apply for all of the projects. The construction cost, not inflated to construction year, but in 2022 is $167 million for all of those projects. And our request will likely be $100 million in corridors of commerce. And then we will have $67 million in agency partner funding. So we have our $10 million from regional solicitation, and we could apply for another regional solicitation for one of the other corridor projects. And then we're actively seeking more federal funding, and then we'll have to do some local matches. So this is pretty exciting, kind of a big project that we're working on. And if we can assemble all the funding, we would be constructing in 2026, 27. So with that concludes my part of the presentation, and all of the presenters today are available for any questions you might have.
Thank you so much for, thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, microphone issues. Thank you to everyone. Such great information. I think the first question that I had back to Bryant on the I-35W corridor study, do you have any timing for the study or for the prep for the 35 County 50 interchange, or anything on timing for that study or projects?
Trying to remember the timeline for the study. I believe it's over the next year that we'll get through that and set the stage for what comes after. So no particular timing on any construction yet, but like I said, study in about a year, then we'll hand off to the county, and the county has funding. Tony can chime in about the next steps there, particularly at the interchange.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll just touch briefly. So the county is going to be looking at a kind of a preliminary engineering design of that interchange, and we'll start looking at probably a consultant contract to help with that in Q2 or Q3 of 23 here.
Okay.
So it'll be a little bit of overlap between the two studies and designs to kind of progress that interchange along. So we'll basically take information from the study and feed it into the design process.
Great. It's
and
just
if I could,
yeah.
Oh, sorry. If I could just add one more thing. So I'm part of that project management team, and they are just starting the public engagement and outreach. And so one of the things that in our team wanted to mention to this group is that looking for feedback from the business community as we're moving forward to shape that study. So they're just, I mean, to Brian's point, it's over the next year. It's really just kicked off in the last month or 2 months, maybe.
That's really helpful for those of us that are not in the transportation world on a daily basis. Sometimes we have to kind of put it in perspective, so to speak, because sometimes we think, oh, they have funding, they're gonna start digging, and it's like sometimes it's years away and sometimes it's not. And so we appreciate the timelines. Thank you for sharing that. Other questions from our group here today? We've received a lot of information.
Jennifer, I have a question.
Yeah.
Aaron, as you talked a lot about looking at different kind of lateral routes. I know that's been proposed multiple times, various sections of the city. The existing one, kind of the Shakopee to Mall of America, what do we see for ridership there? And what does it look like as far as kind of preliminaries on the 42? And where would the 42 one go? Is it Prior Lake to Apple Valley or Rosemount, or how far is that looking at?
Yeah, good questions. So I'll start with the Shakopee route that goes up to the Mall of America. So that's our Route 495. This is an express route, a suburb to suburb express route. So it's limited stop and provides roughly hourly service 7 days a week. This is a route that actually maintained its full service levels throughout the entire pandemic because we saw demand for it. It is one of our more resilient routes. There was a short period, obviously, where everything shut down and ridership dropped on it, but it quickly bounced back and saw nearly pre-COVID levels throughout the entire pandemic on it. So that route, I don't have the exact numbers on it, but it has continued to be successful, and we have those partnerships with Amazon and Mystic to help drive riders to it as well. and then provides those nice connections into Savage and Burnsville, and then ultimately ending up at the Mall of America. On the County Road 42 BRT route, so we don't know the exact alignment yet. So the primary focus is on 42, but we know there's some areas where do we deviate off of that, and what does that look like, especially as we get further west, with Mystic Lake being off of 42, downtown Prior Lake being a decent ways off of the corridor, and then looking at Marshall Road and kind of the Shakopee area and what that looks like as well. So those are all elements that'll be reviewed. Initially, we have kind of a core alignment identified, which is that true like Apple Valley, Burnsville area, with extending a little bit on each side, that we're pretty confident that kind of sticking to that 42 corridor makes sense there. And then from there, we're exploring different alternatives for what that looks like. So that'll be part of this process. We're actually reviewing the alternatives right now in the alignments, and that'll be, I think, in phase 2 of our public and stakeholder engagement of getting thoughts based on some of our initial reviews and reviewing the metrics and things like that based on these alignments.
Excellent, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions from the group?
I have a question.
Yeah.
As a casual biker that likes to rotate the tire around my waist, what are the plans? I love what's going on along 35 to raise that trail along the river valley and Cliff Avenue. That sounds great. But what are we doing to ultimately connect the trail that goes along Highway 13 to get over to the Egan Trail that starts just past Blue Cross Blue Shield, in that huge gap there? You're upgrading the under the bridge Cedar Avenue trail, eventually the path there. But how do we make that connection? Is there any things in the work there to try to make that connection so we can go regionally with the bike trails?
So can you repeat the section that there's a gap?
So from Diffley and 13, it stops on 13, and then you follow 13 across Cedar all the way past Blue Cross Blue Shield before the trail reconnects, and then it goes all the way into the whole region. And so there's a big gap there. Any thought about how to do that, or any effort behind that?
I'd have to look at our multimodal plan to see if that's called out, but I'm sure it is. Like, major gaps have been called out as being part of it. And what we are trying to do is, for a big regional gap like that, we'd have to apply for some federal funding to make that. And typically, if there's not a trail there today, there's a reason. We either don't have right of way, or there's some topography issues. So it tends to be a more expensive project. But I can take note of that area and see, we don't have it necessarily as a plan in our 5-year CIP, but we could certainly take a look to see what we can do, or if we can start applying for funds or something like that.
Thank you, Jen.
I can add to Jen that so the Minnesota River Greenway, there's a little gap that exists today that's currently being designed from essentially that Cedar to connect up to the new trailhead right there on Lone Oak. So the county's got, I think it's almost a 2-phased project to get that extension from Cedar there to the north, which will eventually connect users from all the way from downtown St. Paul to essentially 35 and across the bridge into Bloomington. So there is a long-term greenway connection phase there. It'll probably happen over the next, 2 to 5 years, at least on the greenway level.
That would be terrific. That river valley is amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right. Thank you. Others? I saw another comment in the chat. John, did you want to share an idea or question?
The idea would be, because what I heard in these are these multimodals with the street projects, but I guess the whole idea is then connecting those to the existing parks that we have. And that's kind of as I've been walking more and more of the parks, and the whole idea of connectivity, I think if it's possible to do it wherever we can. The other question I have is with the County Road 42 Express, is there a need for another transit center along 42? If in other words, would that be something that could be based out of the Burnsville Center property?
So that is something that will be at least initially explored, what those facility needs are with the BRT study. We do for MVTA, we do have other facilities along the corridor already that will obviously be included with our Savage Park and Ride, which is just on the Burnsville or border of Burnsville. And then we have our Apple Valley Transit Station as well that will be looked at. But the Burnsville Center area is one that there seems to be a higher need there. And with the redevelopment vision too, it's identified potential station locations for future Orange Line BRT service. So not thinking about the east-west connection, but it is looking at what those options are for a greater facility. What extent that would be is unknown at this point, but it's definitely something that will be looked at.
Thank you.
All right. Other questions, anybody?
I do have one more question. To go east-west in Dakota County, it's so difficult. It's primarily 13 and 42. And with all the improvements being done to 13, are those, I saw those dots essentially along the way, which 13 is so dangerous, trying to get onto that road. So I'm happy to see those improvements. But does that mean that there's going to be controlled intersections and it still won't be contiguous? Or is it to open it up so that it can be more high speed?
So if we get all the funding, there would be no traffic signals between 169 all the way to Nicollet. There would be a traffic signal at Nicollet, but it would be with that quadrant interchange. It would be fewer vehicles going through it, just the through movements essentially. So it would open it up. No traffic signals at Quinton Lynn, Chowan, or Washburn. It would all be interchange.
That's exciting. Thank you. Really appreciate your efforts to all of you.
Jen, can I have you explain what that means? That there's a signal there, but there's mostly through traffic? How does that work?
Let me pull up a graphic because I can't explain without a picture.
Sounds good. That was
okay. Let me reshare. Can you see the image now? Okay.
okay. Yep.
So right now, if you are going on northbound Nicollet and you want to get onto 13, you have to wait in this very long left turn lane, dual left turn lane. So right now they are looking at simplifying that, and same with going through. So you'd be in, there's that through and right turn lane, and that through movement will not be having a signal. You'd have this roundabout and then you just go through. There will be a signal here, but it wouldn't hold up Highway 13 movements. So with signal phasing, it would take out that movement from the signal phase. So here's the signal over here, and it would need to stop through movements on 13 for vehicles that wanted to take a left, or you could do a right without the signal, but it just takes less movements to go through that signal. Another benefit is a lot of the movements that are coming north on Nicollet are going on to 13 to go northbound 35W. Here you would go over and then you'd have a direct connect to 35W, not even getting on 13. So that's another benefit to that signal phase. So if you take vehicles out of that, it should make that signal timing a lot better.
Okay, so essentially it's going to be only if they need to make a left-hand turn onto 13. That's the only signal it would stop traffic for.
Yes. And like I was saying, if you wanted to go on 35W, you wouldn't come through here at this signal. You would go through the roundabout, and you'd have, once you got through this signal, which is a side street, you'd have that direct on ramp. So that movement where people are maybe not getting in the right lane to go onto 35 and trying to merge, that's gone with this design.
Okay, so it extends because there is a, what is it, essentially for the buses and
Yep.
for carpool. I don't remember what the term is.
Yep. They
There is
still
one
have,
of those on ramps there. It extends that all the way to Nicollet then?
yes. So that bus movement, they still have their own lane, their own dedicated lane to bypass signals and things, to that priority lane. This would just be an additional lane built for the vehicles.
Okay.
Do you know what the speed limit is going to be like on that stretch of road?
Well, if it's like a freeway, it will probably be 55, but we haven't determined any of that at this point.
Okay. Because, you know, kids who live on the west side of 13 in the North River Hills area without a school there, their whole community is now across 13. And obviously that's quite a bit further northeast than this, but if they're blazing through because nothing is stopping them from, you know, 169 blazing right up 13, which is excellent and very swift. But then there are neighborhoods that are neighborhoods in that upper section too.
So with this roadway improvement are extensive pedestrian crossing improvements. So on this one here, this is grade separating pedestrians over 13. So right now where there's a signal, and we've unfortunately had a couple of fatalities of pedestrians, this brings the pedestrian up and over 13, not having any conflicts with 13 at all. So
Right,
this is
I
one
see
of the
that,
major
but I'm
benefits.
saying when they're still going very fast because they aren't worrying about a lot of signals or cross traffic or pedestrians because it's all solved there by Nicollet. I'm talking past 11, up closer to Diffley,
Oh,
when they're still going quite fast because it's not that far away. It's, you know, a mile further up the 13.
Signals will still be in place up 13. So we're not making any changes from Nicollet and east/north. So there would still be signalized intersections. There's no plans at this point to make changes to the rest of 13 east of here. So all those crossings would still be the same. And to your point, people are driving fast through there now.
Yeah, that's my point,
yeah.
is you're making it easier to drive faster, except in this one spot where people really need to cross because their community is blended. It's a residential area on both sides. And so I have concerns about what that means for that residential area of Burnsville that's right there, because you're making 13 go faster. I don't want to be the 13 Karen, but I live one house removed from 13. I got a Karen.
Well, understood. I mean, for this, the project limits stop at Nicollet, but understanding that we need to consider the rest of the corridor too.
Yes, that's all I'm suggesting, is that everything you've said looks lovely here, except for the impact that it means for other people down the line or up the line, as it may be.
That's good feedback. I see another question here, Jeff, on timing for that, since there's no funding in place right now for 13 and Nicollet.
Yeah, so we are estimating timing to be 2027 earliest construction. We have that sort of starter money with the regional solicitation, not yet awarded, but likely, and that work would have to be started by 2027. We're already starting a little bit of the preliminary design though, to try and be on top of it, and also to show all of these other grant opportunities that we're more and more shovel ready with every passing day. So
that is important. Great. We're approaching end of time, but we have a few minutes. Are there any other questions on any of the projects or anything else?
If I could, just one thing, I wanted to thank the Chamber of Commerce. So every time I ask Jennifer to write me a letter of support for one of these grants, she's very willing, and so your group is really instrumental in supporting some of these major transportation improvements and the grants that we're seeking. So I wanted to thank you for that.
Well, thanks, Jen. We appreciate the partnership, and obviously all of that runs through our public policy committee, and they, as you know, they always come back with good questions before we write a letter, but obviously very supportive of having really strong transportation here in Burnsville and connections throughout our community. So thank you for all you guys do. Well, with that, I want to just sincere thank you to Jen Desrud from the City of Burnsville for helping pull all of this together. It wouldn't happen without Jen. And thank you so much to Bryant from MNDOT and Tony from Dakota County and Aaron from MVTA and all your other partners here on this call and all the work you do here in Burnsville. We really appreciate it. Thank you to our public policy sponsors and to our public policy committee members for being such great so engaged with transportation and other issues affecting our businesses. With that, on behalf of the Burnsville Chamber of Commerce, I want to say thank you and have a great day.